Last weekend I did a tour of the car, kind of a start and drive, this 1970 Mercedes 280 SE. And this weekend I'm going to try to do an oil change on it and document it for you guys. That oil's been in there for over a year. Only has about maybe 1,200 miles on it though, but I like to change it once a year. And figured I'd show you guys how to change the oil on these W108 chassis from the early 70s. And I'm not going to edit this film at all, actually. I'm going to do one continuous recording, and that'll give you guys a really good idea of how long this really takes to get the car jacked up in the air, drain the oil, change the filter, and replace the oil. So let's get started and jack it up first. So now the car is all jacked up in the air with safety jack stands, and I got blocks of wood under there to protect the frame and the undercoating from chipping off and cracking, and also to distribute the force so we don't get a dent and do any damage. And those two boxes there are just some old tie rod ends, inner and outer tie rods for another car I have yet to make a video about, but I had to replace those last summer. But I'm going to use those to hold the camera up. Never done a video like this before, so it's going to be kind of hard to work on a car and do a good video at the same time, but this will be my first crack at it, so we'll see how it goes. Some of the things you'll need for the oil change are some paper towels and a little flashlight for looking around in case there's some problems. And on this car, just a 17mm wrench, but I like having both a socket wrench and a open end wrench. And if you notice, these wrenches look a little bit weird. They're actually designed for pipes, little flare fittings. I don't have open end wrenches in the metric size of 17mm, but I do have the pipe wrenches in that size, so that's the next best thing. Grab the nut on as many sizes as I can. And of course you're going to need some motor oil. Got a whole case of motor oil plus 3 extra quarts. And you're going to need a new oil filter and a drain pan. And just a kind of an old mat or a box or just anything you can find to kind of lie on so you don't get your shirt too messed up. And so I'll go ahead and set this camera on this box right here, and we'll start the drain process. First thing I'm going to do, actually, is if you notice over there, I got a little white bottle. I'm going to take a sample of that oil before I do anything, and then I'll start the main drain. And one thing I did do is loosen these bolts just a little bit, because it does take 2 hands, and I couldn't do that and hold the camera at the same time. But you guys will get the idea soon enough. So now I took a sample of the oil, and you can see, hopefully, this generously sized drain plug. In case you're running any heavier viscosity oil, or it's really cold, the oil will run out really fast with this nice drain plug. It's also a little bit more difficult to strip, and it's got the copper compression washer as well too, which I think I'm going to go ahead and reuse. But they do give you more replacement washers in the oil filter kit, just in case you need them. I'm going to go ahead and wipe off this plug with some of these paper towels and get it all cleaned up, and pick up my sample jar too and get that out of the way so that doesn't get contaminated. just got a little bit of oil from the sample bottle on the ground, but no big deal. And we're basically done with the drain of the sump, so I'll go ahead and replace the plug and torque it down. In fact, let me let you guys see what this looks like under here. Gotta keep my hands clean because I'm gonna get the oil over my camera. That's why I got plenty of paper towels for this kind of stuff. They work really well. That's all I'm doing right there. Go ahead and start this thing by hand. Run it on down until it makes contact with the washer and the bung in the oil pan sump. Move the drain pan out of the way so I don't hit it with my wrench, because the wrench is a little bit long. Clockwise for tighten, counterclockwise for loosen. And we're just going to apply a little bit of torque on here. Not a whole lot. Just enough to compress that copper compression washer in between, that you can see in between the head of the bolt and the bung on the oil pan. And this is all done now. But if you've watched the video last week, I mentioned that this car has an engine oil cooler. And that can be found over here. And it too has a drain plug with the compression washer, copper washer, just like on the oil pan. Here's the output for the cool oil to go back into the oil pump, which you'll see later. You can't really see it right now. And this is about maybe a quart and a half of oil in here. So you have a drain plug for the oil cooler and drain plug for the oil. And by the way, the radiator is the same way. You've got a drain plug for your engine oil coolant that I'll probably end up doing at some later date. So now that the sump is drained, I'm going to go ahead and drain that oil cooler next. Which hopefully you guys will be able to see. Uses the same wrench, all 17mm for the oil filter as well as the oil cooler. Okay, that bolt is loose, and I think I can go ahead and drain it with one hand and hold the camera, and that way you guys can see. Just loosen it by hand and let it drain. Comes out a little bit slower because it's doesn't have a vent on the top of it. It's all closed, so there's nothing to displace the air as the oil drains out. But it's a really nice feature to have. A lot of cars don't have oil coolers, and if they do, there's no way to drain them. So when you go to change your oil, you've got a quart or more of old oil going through your system. Kind of the same situation you have with today's transmissions and torque converters. They took away the torque converter drain plug years ago, so when you change your transmission fluid, you're only changing about half the fluid. being an older car, that's not the case in this car. In this car I was able to drain the torque converter and the transmission, as well as crack one of these lines open and drain the transmission cooler, which, just like in most cars, is found in a oil to water heat exchanger in the bottom tank of the radiator. So we'll let that drain. I think that most people would edit this out because it's not really very riveting to sit here and watch oil drain out of a oil cooler, but I just wanted to, well, A, I don't have a video editor, and B, this gives you an idea of exactly how long this is going to take. The only thing I did before I started making the video was get all the materials together in one spot here in my breezeway in my house, just to kind of go over all the different kinds of things that you would need, and that took about maybe 7 minutes, 10 minutes, something like that. So you can kind of add that on to your the time to do this job. I usually let it drain until I don't get any more of a solid stream. When it starts to just drip out, then I know I've got a pretty solid drain. Here's some of the underside of the engine. You can see the vibration damper on the crankshaft pulley there. And you can see the one of the dampers. Looks like a little shock absorber for the engine to minimize the vibration from the engine. And there's the sump that I drained. It's got a dent on the driver's side of it because my mom, back when she was driving the car, ran up on a curb when she was trying to park, but fortunately that didn't damage the metal to the point where it would leak any oil. And you got your front sway bar. Bushings look like they're in good shape. Of course, the fan shroud and all that kind of stuff. So it looks like we're at nothing more than a drip here. I'll go ahead and clean up this plug a little bit, which also has a copper washer, and we'll go ahead and replace that. Again, starting everything by hand, good and snug, and we'll tighten it down. Now that doesn't have to be too tight, just like on the bolt for the sump. I'm going to wipe off some excess strippage here. But the main difference is that unlike the bolt on the sump, that oil is not under any kind of pressure. So it doesn't have to be too tight. It's always irritating when you go to these quick lube places, they just tighten that bolt as hard as they can. But being on an oil cooler, that bolt really is under some pressure, so I tighten that just a little bit tighter, but still not too much so. So now it's going to be on to the oil filter, and I hope I can get that for you guys. It's going to be a little bit of a challenge because of its unique design. This car doesn't have a spin-on oil filter. It's got a cartridge oil filter, which I like, actually. Most of the manufacturers are doing it nowadays to claim that they're better for the environment, but the real reason is cost. And what I like about them is it gives you the ability to see what's going on in that engine a little bit. You can see the filter housing and everything and see what kind of contamination you got in there. And that's the oil filter. know if I can do this with one hand. I'm going to give it a try. Uses the same 17mm wrench. It's got a long bolt going through the center of it. That bolts up to the oil pump housing. And you can see some of that oil starting to drain out. The trick is to keep undoing this bolt until you think it's just about out, but not let the whole thing come crashing down on your head and all the oil spill out of it. So I try to drain as much oil out of it as I can as I go along. And the engine is fully warmed up actually. I just got through driving around just to warm up the oil. That way I get a really good drain. And I'm just kind of shaking the filter just to get the oil level down just a few millimeters below the mating surfaces, so I can hopefully invert this as I back out that bolt and not make too big of a mess. The trick you can do is to apply upward pressure to sort of mate these two surfaces together while you loosen the bolt with your two fingers under here. Okay, now you can see this bolt is, well, backed all the way out. Now we can go ahead and invert. I'm going to tip it over just to, well, looks like it's mainly drained. Work it out between the outer tie rod and the control arm. And I'm just going to set that up like that right now while I reposition the camera, clean up a little bit, and take out that filter and clean up the housing. I'm going to put this camera back on the tripod and maybe you guys can see what I'm looking at here, if I can get it positioned just right. So you've got a aluminum housing, rubber O-ring. Here's your long center bolt, which comes out. And then, of course, the oil filter. So I made a little bit of a mess here, but I'm going to go ahead and finish draining this thing out. Take out the filter and take out the O-ring and replace it with a new one. You guys are seeing this for the first time just like I am. You can kind of hopefully see inside that filter housing what it looks like. No debris. But one of the tools I forgot to get is a little screwdriver to work out this O-ring here. So I'll just head to the garage real quick. Gonna try to film this as best I can. You just want to work the screwdriver in between the O-ring and the filter body. Pry that out just like that and discard. I'm kind of a clean freak when it comes to doing the maintenance, so I try to clean everything up as best I can. This is a good opportunity to go ahead and do that. That car is a little bit dirty underneath because it has a power steering gear leak, which tends to make the other maintenance a little bit more difficult because everything is just so dirty. We're almost at the point now where we can get that new filter out and work in the new O-ring. Okay, so it's back to the little storage area here. There's the old oil filter just sitting there draining. And now we'll get into our new filter, the MAN H720X. Here's your kit. That includes copper washer for the sump drain plug, oil cooler drain plug, and a washer for the oil filter fastener. And a brand new oil filter, which I like this brand because it seems to be a little bit higher quality. It's made in Germany and has a genuine metal crimp to tie the filter pleats together. Has more pleats per unit area, so the filter surface area is a lot better than most. And metal end caps. So this is representative of OEM quality. I'm not sure what the micron rating is on it. Try to get this O-ring out with one hand. I'm going to keep these washers because I've reused the old ones, and I'll just save those for a rainy day. Good to have on hand because you can't really buy those things separately. Let's see if I can prop this camera up on something while I show you how to install that O-ring. So basically what you want to do is get some fresh oil. I've already cleaned out the surface. We'll take some fresh oil, and just like you do on a spin-on filter, we want to get a little bit of oil on this O-ring to make a good seal. So So you just work a little oil between your fingers. And just get a little bit oily, you don't need to have too much. And replace the cap so nothing flies in it and contaminates the new oil. And we'll just lay this O-ring in here. Kind of run your finger around just to make sure it's evenly seated. Take your bolt and run it through. So it's basically ready for the filter. Which I'll show you guys a little bit of a trick I like to do to minimize the dry startup that's inevitably going to happen. But hopefully it wouldn't be too bad on a nice warm day like today. What I'm going to try to do is saturate this new filter with the fresh oil. Same thing the engine's going to do when it fires up. I do the same thing with the spin-on oil filters as well. It's a little bit more tricky and messy to do with the cartridge filters because there's nothing to catch the oil. But this will saturate the filter media enough to where hopefully when the engine is started for the first time it'll minimize the time that it runs dry. So that's about as saturated as I can get it. It feels a little bit heavy. Gonna go ahead and stick it in the cartridge. You can see the bolt. So now this thing is ready to install back in the vehicle. See if I can get a good angle on it again. Now the tricky part is, let's see if I can change hands here, because I'm actually left-handed. Caught myself holding the camera with the left hand instead. Tricky part is to work it up in there without getting a whole bunch of contamination in the way from all the nastiness. With one hand at the same time. And again, you want to turn that bolt clockwise to tighten. Run everything down by hand. Kind of move the filter around a little bit each time to make sure it's seated properly so we're not crimping anything and nothing's bound up. And now we'll use our 17mm to tighten the bolt. Again, this doesn't have to be terribly tight. We just want to make sure that O-ring is compressed as much as possible. Because this is going to be under some pressure as well, just like that oil cooler. Just good and snug is all it takes. And I see I got a little bit of drippage there, which I'm going to clean off. Not because the underside of the car is in such great, pristine, clean condition, but this will allow me to check for leaks. Once the engine's started and we get some oil pressure starting to build up, if everything's nice and clean, you'll be able to detect right away if you got a leak and where it's coming from. Okay. All clean for that. Now what we have to do is take the car off the jack stand and start filling it up with clean, fresh oil. I'll be running out of tape here in a few minutes, so hope I can show you guys. Here's the oil filler cap. Interesting, in German it's actually OEL. I just noticed that when I got the car. And you can see the camshaft in there. Hopefully. Well, maybe not. Let me get my light. Yeah, you can see a little bit of the camshaft. But anyway, let me start adding some oil. I'm going to start with the oil that I already got into when I lubricated the O-ring and pre-lubed the filter a little bit. This particular engine, along with the oil cooler, takes 6.8 quarts. That's what it works out to be. It's actually, specification is actually in liters. What I think I'll do is put about 6 quarts in there, run the engine, and then check the oil and see how much I have in there. Doesn't have to be gnat's ass, but I do like it to be a little bit close. Just bang my head on that hood again, just like I did last time. That's the one drawback to this car, is that grill is so long. When you're working on it, it's easy to bang your head, and I did a pretty good job of that last time. Beautiful day for doing jobs like this. Couldn't really do it in the wintertime. It's about maybe 65 degrees out here, so the oil pours out nice and clean and thick. I mean, thin and pretty comfortable to work. There's something about cold weather. If you hit your hand on something, it hurts, 10 times worse than it really usually does. Not sure why. So that's been 3 quarts. Just trying to figure out how to open oil with one hand. Pretty difficult. It'd be nice to have an assistant. That would make a much better video than somebody just doing it by themselves. Really do wish you guys can see a little bit more down in there. See what that camshaft looks like. Sure, you guys have a pretty good idea what it looks like, but it'd be nice to see it for real. And of course, you always want to make sure, I do happen to have a new case of oil, but you always want to make sure that you're putting in the right viscosity grade and the right product. I've heard of horror stories where people had their oil mixed up and they were putting transmission fluid in the engine and didn't know it, and 70, 90 gear oil and all kinds of other stuff, and had to start all over again. Really amazed I haven't spilt a ton of oil opening it up like that with one hand and between your legs and everything. Okay, so we have 6 quarts that we put in. Probably a little bit less than that because some of that fresh oil ended up in the drain pan. But I want to try to charge that filter. Place the cap, and now we'll go ahead and fire it up and check our level. And one of the things to look out for is that oil pressure gauge, and see how long it takes to build pressure after a complete oil change. Running dry right now, no pressure at all. A lot of air entrainment. There it goes. Got full pressure. That's one of the benefits of having a true oil pressure gauge. Is not only does it show you the trend of what the oil pressure is doing in the engine as you're driving, but you can also use it as a tool. Very handy. There you see the camshaft loads making contact with the rockers, and there you see the tip of one of the valves. I'm not sure if that's an intake or the exhaust. Everything's got nice fresh oil. You can kind of see how it gets lubricated. One of the good things about an older car like that, you can actually watch them operate. So we know we're getting plenty of oil on the top end. You can see how clean this engine is. You can even read the number 2 on the top of the head, I think, if I can zoom in. So we know we got enough oil for the top end lubrication, but I think it's run long enough to get all the air out and stabilize the oil pressure. So one little quick rev just to work it out a little bit. I don't like revving an engine too much without any kind of load applied, but that did the job. Still have plenty of oil pressure. Now we'll shut it down. And we'll check our level. Hopefully this tripod is going to be at the right height for this. Hope you guys can see. Looks like I need about another half a quart. Give that a chance to drain down into the sump a little bit so I can get a more accurate reading. Sometimes things just take a little bit of time. I'm going to go ahead and add in the rest of that quart. Got about a quarter of a quart left actually. It's like we're dead on the money. I don't know how well you guys can see that. So I'm going to go ahead and clean everything up and put stuff away. Maybe go on another little drive. And that's pretty much how long it takes to do an oil change on W108. The job ended up going pretty well considering one hand. Let me just check for leaks real quick. Of course now the car is on the ground. I don't know how much I can show you guys. Doesn't look like it's leaking. Let me check the oil cooler and oil pan drain plug. And that's bone dry. And that may be leaking, I'm not really sure. It was like that before, so I'm going to go ahead and check that out. But there you guys have it, the first maintenance video of this 1970 Mercedes 280 SC, this classic car, fun to drive car, and now you know how to change the oil, which is going to be a very similar process to how you change the oil in any car. And I'll show, as the other cars need it, I'll show how to change oil in them as well too. So I hope this has been informative and helpful.